Hello, I'm Edgar Allan Poe, and welcome to the Poe House. We're going to be bringing you some nice programs, readings from my works, every week from now on. And we hope you enjoy them, and we hope you'll turn in regularly. And I'd really like you to come see my real house on Amity Street in Baltimore. The information's on the screen, and we hope we'll see you there some weekend. And it was very exciting for me that they've recently reopened the Poe House. And I hope you'll have a look at it, and have a look at this also.
And Poe himself, I'd like to raise a glass of Martell Cognac to Poe, to honor him and the Poe enthusiasm in Baltimore and around the world. To Poe, as we stand in front of the house where he once lived, wrote, and loved. Thank you. All right, so now we have the symbolic passing of Poe from the city of Baltimore to Poe Baltimore Incorporated, and your very able representative. You don't know how hard I had to fight to make this a stuffed raven and not a real one. I'm telling you, the Poe enthusiasts they were very insistent, but I didn't trust a little bird. So this one I trust. So with this, I pass the Poe House from the city of Baltimore to Poe Baltimore Incorporated. God bless you, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. At this time, I'd like to invite everybody to enjoy some refreshments in the back. I'll be taking the mayor through the house, and then in about a little bit, the house will be open for tours, and we welcome you inside to take a look at what we've been up to for the last year.
We're here at the Poe House, and I'm here with Kristen Harbison, who is the president of Poe Baltimore. Thank you for talking with us. Can you tell us a little bit about Poe Baltimore?
Sure. We are the brand new nonprofit. We were formed with the mission of protecting, exploring, and celebrating the legacy of Edgar Allan Poe, not only at the Edgar Allan Poe House behind me, but also in Baltimore and beyond. His legacy is phenomenal in art, in literature, in music, in everywhere. So, but the house obviously is our heartbeat, our telltale heartbeat, as it were. And so that is, but we are brand new, and we've been formed over the last about 16 months, and this is our debut event. It's especially exciting to see all these people here going into the house for the first time. The exhibits have been refreshed, they've been updated to reflect our broader mission of not just Edgar Allan Poe in Baltimore itself, but the broader mission of Edgar Allan Poe in Baltimore. And so these are brand new exhibits, and the people who are going in behind us are seeing the house for the first time, are some of our very first visitors.
And in addition to the house, are there any artifacts on display that were actually used by?
Absolutely. We have, my favorite is the traveling writing desk. It's very typical of 19th century writing desks. I have one very similar to it at home, but this one is special because this one belonged to Edgar Allan Poe. We have a chair, so you can imagine him sitting in the chair with the writing desk on his lap, writing MS in a Bottle, which was one of his first writings, which was written while he was in this house.
Wow. Wow. And do we know what other of his works were written here?
Oh, there are several, and we've got a list of them written through on exhibit in the house. But this was the first place that he really considered to be home.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and don't go away. We will be right back. Welcome to my house, the Poe House. And for me, it really is the Poe House. You see, I never made barely a thing off my works when I was alive. Now, others have profited from my works. You see, others are still profiting from my works to this day. Alas, almost everyone but myself. And here is a good compilation of my works by Avenel Publishing Company. And I'm going to be reading some selections from this book for you today. The Telltale Heart. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed and dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture. A pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 nights. Every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed. And so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So, you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just as 12, I looked upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch, with a thick darkness, for the shutters were so close fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily, steadily. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh, no! It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening, with its dreadful echo, the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he'd been lying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever growing since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor. Or, it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a little, a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot from out the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say louder, every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet, for some minutes longer, I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now, A new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once, only once. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. Then I smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. Ha ha! When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I shook my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they chat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and continued and gained definiteness until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles, and in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men. But the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. They heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder, louder, louder! Villains, I shrieked, dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here. It is the beating of this hideous heart. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and don't go away. We will be right back. And here I am now with Courtney Wilson, who's the executive director of the B&O Railway Museum in Baltimore. And you're also on the board of Po Baltimore, is that right?
I am as of yesterday.
Great, great. And is there a relationship between the B&O and Po Baltimore?
Absolutely, we're best neighbors ever, right down the street. And actually, historically, Edgar took a train trip from the location of the museum out to Ellicott City to visit with his friend John Pendleton Kennedy in 1833.
Mm-hmm. And he probably rode the rails many other times that aren't documented,
No
right?
doubt about it.
Yeah.
In fact, he was taking a train back to New York from Richmond when he was found in Baltimore and ultimately died.
Great. And how many people do you have on an average weekend at the B&O?
At the B&O, gosh, we'll have anywhere from 600 to 800 people come through.
Wow. And you think a lot of those will be coming over here to the Po House?
We're going to promote the Po House very heavily and hope that our visitors who come from around the world will take the time to come over and see this.
Great. And how far is it from here?
It's literally 6 blocks away, 6 blocks north.
Great. And what was your involvement with the efforts to get the Po House back open?
Well, I like to call the B&O Museum a midwife on this project because we were actually hired by the city of Baltimore to create the new nonprofit, to redo the interior of the house, design exhibits, and help get the house reopened. And that's what we've been doing for the past year.
And how can people help with these efforts?
Well, the house is going to be open thanks to a grant from Free Fall Baltimore through the month of October. And then Po Baltimore needs to go out and raise significant funding so that they can become a sustainable organization in the city. And I'm going to help them do that. Everyone needs to help them do that. Donations can be made on the website, which is www.po.baltimore.org. And of course, there's a mailing address there and things for checks. And we'll be doing fundraisers. We'll be doing some events around town, and all that's going to go toward keeping the house open.
Okay, and a little while ago we witnessed the symbolic passing of the raven from the mayor of Baltimore to Po Baltimore.
I happen to have that very famous raven right here in my hand.
Yes, very nice, very
And
nice.
For years, for years, the city of Baltimore, 30 years, operated this house. And because of budgetary constraints, the city made a decision last year about this time that they could no longer sustain the operation of the house. And that's how all this got started. And it's just been a labor of love for us at the B&O, and it's been a labor of love for the city. And we work together hand in hand to create this new, grand, reinvented and reimagined attraction for Baltimore.
And how do you feel about how things went today?
It was a perfect day, weather, sun. Maybe
Turnout?
it would have been better. Turnout was terrific. Maybe it would have been better on a cloudy day with thunder and lightning in the background.
Yeah.
But just the same, it was a wonderful, wonderful ceremonial morning.
Great. Once, upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow. Sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. Methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfall tinkled on the tufted floor. "Wretch," I cried, "thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he has sent thee respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Well, I hope you enjoyed my reading here today, and that about wraps it up this time. And goodbye for now. I hope we'll see you again soon.